So welcome, Namrata. We've known each other probably just for a couple of years. Great to see you tonight, and thank you so much for being part of this women's series called A Woman's Rite of Passage to Self-Love. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with you.
Namrata, your transition over the last couple of years, how would you describe what that was? I don't even know the word that I'd like to use for it. So you'll come up with what has been that change in your life, particularly over the last 2 years or 3 years?
God, that's, I've been thinking about it, before I decided to do this. I was like, what would I call it? It's been about rewriting my whole story.
Nice.
So the transition, I don't even have a word for it because it was such a life-changing experience from being who I used to be to the person I'm becoming every day. No, it's really hard to come up with a name for it.
That's probably why I asked that question in that particular way. What would be the closest name that comes in this moment? We're not going to hold you to it, but what would the closest word or expression be?
I think it would be just life-changing. That's what I could call it as of now, because it has been life-changing. I'm learning so much more about myself and about the whole process that I've been through. Yeah, it's definitely been life-changing.
So I know a teensy-wincy part of your change over the last few years. Can you just enlighten us on what that looked like for you? What was it?
So, I mean, in all honesty, what it was about having the weight loss surgery, which was the bariatric sleeve done through the public system. However, in the process, I've lost just over 80 kgs, and I've gone from a size 26 to about a 16. I'm between a 16 and an 18 now. That was the idea, was to lose weight so I wouldn't have any health issues later on in my life. Because I'm 33 now, and I had the surgery just after I turned 30, just before my 31st birthday. So the last 2 years about dealing with that change and about liking who I am, because it's been an ongoing process, and the development around it has gone from going through this massive change, being in recovery, physical recovery for such a long time, and then having other issues around it, whether they've been emotional or mental health related. It's about redefining my life. So that's what it's been in the last 2 years for me.
So many people could see this as a weight loss story, but you and I know that it's beyond that, and you're talking about rewriting your whole flippant story. It's not about just the shedding of weight for you. It's been around huge changes, huge stuff around your recovery, which I heard a little about. So can you run us through really the process for you? So you went through the system, you went through the medical system.
Yeah, it was supposed to be something that was supposed to be straightforward and easy, because I had no predisposing conditions like diabetes or anything. I do have a family history. No, I didn't. Okay. So it was a very simple, straightforward case where I was, my BMI was extremely high. I weighed 173 kgs. They thought, okay, she herself is a therapist. This is going to be a very straightforward case. I went through the system. I had this surgery. Nothing went wrong. Up to 3 weeks later, it was just downhill. It was something that became something that was supposed to be really simple and easy to something that went from being absolutely functioning to extremely non-functioning, because I went from being extremely active, going out, working every day, having a full-time job, to being unemployed because I had to give up. I took medical retirement halfway through my recovery because I couldn't do it anymore. I stopped driving. I couldn't walk without my crutches. I had a walker when I was in hospital. So it was about relearning even how to walk every day.
Wow. So was that part of your expectation, or you expected that you'd be up walking around doing your thing, going back to work? Is that what you expected after 3 weeks?
Yeah, after 3 weeks, it was like I returned back to work. After 2 weeks, I knew a few other people who had the surgery, and they've been absolute perfect examples of, okay, they've come back to work after 3 weeks and life has been fine. They've lost weight, they've maintained that weight, and it has been an easy ride. Whereas for me, it was about, I went from someone who was a size 26, who would go to work, who could walk herself everywhere, who would drive. I was very functioning, to went to someone who stayed in a bed every day. And that's the first time I realized what actual depression would feel like. I became this anxious human being who didn't know what was going to happen next because I'd been through the hospital system for a whole year. And I became completely dependent on my mother and my brother, my friends, my family, because I locked myself away from the world because I just couldn't get out of my bed.
So that recovery period was more a physical thing, or you're saying it was more a depressive thing? What?
It was a combination of both. Initially, it started about physically being sick, unable to eat, started going to the hospital, where it was a more physical thing, till a point when nobody knew what was going wrong or what was going to happen next. I was in and out of hospital. I had to stop going to work. I think slowly, the depression started seeping in because I became completely non-functioning. So I started staying home. I started watching more TV, and I was like, that's okay. I don't need to go back to work yet. So I'll just put my life on hold. I think from there it went post my birthday. After that, I was like, oh, who wants to be in the hospital at their birthday? So I made the doctor discharge me. I was like, I can't do this. I can't spend the whole year in hospital. So it became about getting myself discharged because I was feeling a little bit better. But a few days later, I was back in and out of the hospital again. And without realizing, the downhill story of my mental health along with my physical health started playing out. I think we reached a time when I just came out of hospital and the nurse had asked me a question in front of my brother and my mother. Now, culturally, it was a huge thing because the question she asked me was about if I wanted to self-harm or if I was thinking about any kind of risky behaviors to myself. And I went from sitting on the other side, being a clinician who would ask people that and ask permission before I asked that.
Yeah, because you're in the
in
field
front
of
of my
addiction,
mom. Yeah, because I work in addiction, and it was interesting because I sat on the other side and felt like, oh my God, this is what my clients must feel every time I ask them that question. I was so afraid to look at my mother and my brother, and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe she just did this to me. I completely was in shock. I could barely answer not because I didn't know the answers to those questions. It was just the shock of it, because how was I going to explain to my mother, I am not suicidal. I'm not going to harm myself. So I went in that moment and realized, oh my gosh, she must really think I'm unwell because she's asked me this question. So I answered the question. I knew exactly what I needed to answer to get out of my appointment. That's when I realized, oh my God, that my world actually stopped spinning at that moment. I couldn't actually tell anybody at that stage, but that's when I wrote an email to my manager and said, look, I've actually decided I don't think I can come back to work yet. So we set up a meeting. I took medical retirement from work. And that's when I realized I lost that hope of recovery at that stage. And that's when just the anxiety and slight depression turned into something bigger. Because by then I'd realized I had no more control over my life. I had to take medical retirement. I mean, imagine at the age of 31, you decided that your only options are either you get completely unemployable in the future, or you just take medical retirement. I mean, my manager was amazing about it. And he was like, are you sure? And I said, no, I'm sure. I'm not ready to come back to work. I could barely drive myself. Actually, rather than that, I couldn't even drive myself. I needed help to come out of a shower and things like that. So it was basic functions like taking a shower by myself, picking up a cup of tea, walking myself to the toilet. Everything that we take for granted was gone. I couldn't walk steps without having a helping hand or holding the railing while walking down or using my crutches while getting down and walking back up. So it was a defining moment when I decided to take medical retirement. That's when I knew the depression had kicked in, and actually I wasn't even aware of it till then, because by then I decided, oh, it's okay. I don't have to worry about money because I've got lots of family support. My sister was helping out by paying our mortgage and our bill. Like, I could afford my mortgage, but I didn't have to worry about anything else because I had huge family support. And when you come from a collective background like mine, it's all taken care of, right? From your bills to medical appointments to cooking, everything's taken care of. So that makes a huge difference, I think, because often people did ask me, how are you managing? I said, what's there to manage? I've got a whole family support.
Wow, what a blessing, hey? How many people can say that these days, yeah?
Absolutely. So I was one of those very lucky people because I have my whole family here. And then on top of that, my friends that are part of my family would visit the hospital, whether it was bringing movies at home, buy me the little ice cream when I was in the hospital for so long. Just because little pleasures, though I couldn't eat much of it, it was the small little pleasures of life that I was reminded that I was really blessed because I had people looking after me.
So tell me what the transition was in terms of the love that you have for your body. What did it look like before?
What happened?
Because I certainly know from what you've just said, which is surprising to us, you expected to be up and recovered very, very quickly, and that turned to custard or did a big loop. Yeah. How about where was the state of the love for your body before and after?
The funny thing about that is that, when you think of someone who's a size 26, weighed at 173 kgs, you have this image in your head. Now, I'm someone who's reasonably tall for, in my community, I'm tall enough, like I'm not considered short, I'm like 5'8.5". So I was like, okay, I'm reasonably tall. So I carried my weight really well because it was functioning. But as my body started transitioning over time, I was really sick. So people would come home, visit me and say, oh, but at least you look nice. And it started making me think about, so what do you mean? Didn't I look better before? Or was my body not good enough? The reason I had that surgery was not because I could be a size 16. The reason for me was I don't get unwell in the future because I was 31. I was physically better than most people who had that surgery.
Sure.
But the fear was what happens in the future. And when people would look at me and say, oh, but you look beautiful or you look better now. And I used to think back then and think, was I not good enough before? Or how can you say I look beautiful because I felt terrible? I felt extremely terrible. I couldn't see what people were seeing. Most people were like, look, your skin's glowing. And I was like, I've been to hospital 7 times this year. Do you think I really care about how my skin looks at this stage? The funniest thing was, for a few things that I noticed that made a huge difference was I used to have really long, thick hair, and that started following. And we would walk around the house and all you could see was my hair falling over. Now, if you've seen ever someone who's had cancer treatment or been in chemo,
and it's coming out in lumps.
It felt like. Yeah, it was out of lumps. My brother used to vacuum the house twice a day because he had like this beige carpet. So, my black thick hair was all over the show, whether it was the bathroom, whether it was the room, it was all over. And that's when I started realizing something wasn't right. Though my weight was reducing, my body size was going down, my skin was looking great, but my hair was not okay. I couldn't still walk straight. I couldn't enjoy the person that I was becoming because when I looked into the mirror, I couldn't recognize that person. I couldn't enjoy the body I had because it wasn't functioning. So that was probably the hardest thing, was looking into the mirror every day, knowing that I had this surgery so I would lose that weight so I wouldn't get unwell. But experiencing a whole year in and out of hospital, being in my mom's bed the whole time was probably the hardest. It was really hard because I expected that when I would lose weight, I had this huge dream that when I would lose weight, I would go horse riding, I could go back swimming, I would do all these other things that I'd stopped doing or was unable to do before. But I couldn't. I was so unwell that I could barely walk to the toilet. So everything went out of the window and it became about how do you enjoy a size 14, a weight that was just under 90 kgs, but I didn't feel connected to myself because mentally I wasn't prepared to be that size that quickly.
I was wondering about that dramatic transition versus something that takes some time.
Yeah, or not. Also because it came quite easily, but not at the same time. Like it was easy to lose the weight, but I'd stopped eating completely. I was basically surviving on like few soups or a few spoons of soups every day. Water was the only thing that kept me alive. I could barely get through my medication. I couldn't take painkillers. I was in and out of hospital for so long that I had so many bruises on my arms that I actually felt like one of those addicts and junkies that had lost every vein in their body to manage. So that's how I felt like at the point. I said, how can I enjoy this size I am or the beautiful skin I've got when I'm not functioning. Because for me, it was not about the way I looked, but it was more about what I could do with the newfound body.
Yeah.
And
most of
that's
us would expect that that whole image of yourself would potentially change and not even consider that the function was something that was impacted. Yeah.
And that's one thing that really stood us was, you know how we take granted for taking every step when you walk on the street or when you're walking towards the car? I became so conscious of every little step. I would count in my head, okay, I have so many steps to go. I have this much time it's going to take me to walk from here to there. Things that I took for granted at the size 26, which was unbelievable because I could go for boxing classes. People used to teach me how to box and things when I was over a size 24, and I could barely lift my arm to brush my own hair. My mom would do that, or my sister-in-law would help out. It was like everything had just stopped. So one of the greatest things though I learned from that whole process was that of being humble. It really, really did teach me to be humble, because
So
things that
prior
I
to the
took for
transition,
granted.
were you, I imagine, just being the person that you are, I imagine that you're a great caregiver. Were you very
You
good
could
at
say that.
were you very good at receiving stuff back in those days? Or has this
Was I
transition
good at
supported you actually learn to say, yes, please, thank you very much?
Actually, honestly, yeah, that was something was really hard, was asking for support and accepting support. Not that I didn't have enough around me already, but I grew up believing that because I had so much, that it's okay not to ask for more support because I was already blessed. My dad had made sure that we had everything that we needed. Mom kept it going, and then when my dad passed away, my brother looked after it. There was always my sister who was the reality check. So I did really struggle to ask for help or tell people that this is what I needed. Even when I was in hospital, I would be like telling the nurses that that's okay, you know, somebody else needs you. You go ahead and come back to me. And
That's independent.
yeah, they would be like, but this is your turn. I said, it's okay. I'm not going anywhere. I can't really run. So you can come back to me. But it took a long time to learn that it was okay to ask for help, that the world would come to an end. But it also made me really humble in the sense that it made me realize that I have a second chance at life and I'm not going to waste it. So,
absolutely. It sounds like a great sense of humor was good medicine as well, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. Made, I think nurses crazy at the hospital. They couldn't, they were just over me after a point. They knew I was back in the hospital as soon as they heard my voice. It was something that my sense of humor did keep me alive. It was one thing.
Well, it lights a lot of
Definitely.
people up as well. And, you know, often giving to others is often a good medicine as well, yeah?
Absolutely.
So where, Namrata, did grief play a part in your transition? Do you consider there was a grieving process of sorts?
Hugely. It's taken me a long time to talk about it because at that moment I wasn't ready about it. I remember I was in ER again for the umpteenth number of time with both my siblings. My sister and my brother was standing right there. And I think there was a moment when my sister looked at me and she said, you know what, I'm done coming to the hospital all the time. She said, you need to get better. And in my head, I thought, oh, you bloody bitch, I can't believe you've just said this to me. I'm in ER, it's all about me. And for some reason, I think my brother had to step out and she was left alone. And that's when we had that conversation. And she reminded me and said, you know, this is what it felt like when our dad was dying. And that's when I realized how much grief I was sitting with, because what I'd done was during that process, when I started getting unwell, I reached a stage in my head when I thought, you know what, it's okay. I can just give up. And I'm not someone who easily gives up. I'm one of those people who will keep fighting till I get what I
Very
want.
tenacious, yeah.
Yeah, at that moment, I realized that my will to live had just disappeared because I was so tired of not knowing what was wrong. And when she said that statement about my dad, I realized how much grief I was holding on to. I remember staying in hospital a few days after that as well. I was sitting in the room and thinking one day when I had time to myself, and I thought, is she correct? Is she right? Am I reliving the grief and making everyone around me relive it? Because we all saw what it did to us at that stage, especially my sister, because along with my mom, she was my dad's caretaker at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see what I was doing to her, but I just couldn't bring myself to do anything about it. And the grief of, losing not just my self-identity, because
Mm-hmm.
for at least the last 15 years, I've always known myself as that plus size person, someone who I could, every time I looked into the mirror, that's what I identified with, like the big mama walking on the road, So I was a really plus size person, and that's who I had become for such a long time that I didn't realize losing that weight and being unable to look in the mirror and see this is who I am was part of the grief that kicked in as well. At the same time, realizing that losing my father was probably the hardest thing, and that got entangled with my own grief.
Got it.
About being unable to function, unable to be who I was, because at one stage I even stopped talking. I'm someone who's quite a chatterbox. I talk for hours to people, but I reached a stage where all I wanted was everyone to just switch off. I just wanted the world to stop spinning so I could just be and just lay in my bed, and no one would bother me about eating or ask me to feel better, or the physio telling me to walk and see in the hospital. All I wanted was to be depressed. I just wanted to stay grieving in my bed. And that's when I realized how sad I was when my sister pointed that out. I did thank her, I think, a few months later when I came out of it. But at that it was probably the hardest thing, telling her she was right, because all I wanted to do was swear at her. But yeah, that's when the grief really kicked in, and I decided I had to do something about it. I thought, I can't do this. My mom's already lost her husband. My mom had just turned, see that here. I said, I can't do this to my siblings. It's not their fault, because actually the funny part was, because my whole family was against the operation. They were like, really, you don't need a weight loss surgery. You can just do this another way. Don't do this, But it's like, no, I've tried everything in the world. So I kind of felt like I can't punish them anymore. It was a decision I made. My mom was very supportive. She said, look, if you want to do this, fine, we'll support you. But are you sure you're making the right choice for yourself? And I said, yeah. And so did my brother and my sister-in-law and my sisters support me through it. But it was an informed choice that I made. But I realized I was also punishing everyone around me, because I was grieving and I didn't know how to deal with that grief. And so did I put that on, say, my best friend and things like that, because I was willing to just disconnect from the world. I just wanted to stay under the covers for the rest of my existence. Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted. And which was quite a big surprise, because when I was a plus size person, I'm still a plus size, but not the way I used to be, because I was morbidly obese. I knew what to do with myself. I knew who I was. I was comfortable in my own skin. I was a very self-confident person. It never bothered me. The funny thing about the whole transition with the grief and, the loss of my identity became about, who am I now? If I'm not someone who's a size 26, someone who's that morbidly obese person walking down the road, who am I now? And that's the question that I kept asking myself. And often I would, while walking down the road, or, shopping in the mall or going to someone's house, I would stop suddenly and look in the mirror and feel really lost. People would think, okay, she's probably getting obsessed with the way she's looking. But what people couldn't see on the other side was that I was lost, because every time I looked at a reflection of mine, I was surprised.
It's almost like the toddler doing training steps, and going, who am I now that I'm, upright? The world looks different.
It did. And because it was just like the toddler learning to walk again, learning to take those steps without my crutches, because I had to finally stop using them. So I had 2 different sets of them at my house, and my mother was like, okay, now it's time to start doing this without them. So I started taking steps without them, and it was like, okay, looking down and saying, okay, now there's a step coming, reminding myself, programming my brain and rewiring it to know, this is what you do. And it was funny because as a 31-year-old, you don't need to teach yourself these things. You know, you're supposed to know. I was thinking, what if I don't know how to drive anymore? And they all just looked at me. They were like, I don't think you can forget. I said, you would be surprised if my brain can't cope with walking. How is it supposed to cope with driving? So it's about relearning everything. It was about relearning how to brush my hair so that it wouldn't fall all over. It was relearning what was appropriate to eat and not eat. And it was also about relearning that it's okay to be the size I am. It took a long time to accept my new identity. I'm still working on it now, but it's just got easier because I've had to learn that it's okay, that I can love myself. I can still be that amazing person that I am at that size. Because I have regained weight. It's not like I haven't. You know, though I lost 83 kgs, I have almost gained like about 15 to 20 kgs. And that was another learning curve over the last 8 months because I started working full time again. So it became a point, okay, now I can eat chocolate cake. So I missed it for 18 months. Let's eat it. Then it became, I can have coffee now. So I'm going to have coffee again. It was small pleasures in life that I started taking for granted again. And then it was about reminding myself, actually, am I doing this because I've missed eating or because I've missed being fat? And
that's a beautiful question. And your answer is?
It was because it was comfortable being a plus size person. You know, I knew who I was. I knew how to handle conflict with other people when I was a bigger size. I knew how to handle the shopkeepers or the sales girls when I was a plus size, because when I went in as a size 14, and I went to all these shops that I've never been to before, I would get served and I would just feel like, would you have served me if I was a size 26? You know, those questions that you ask yourself. And I realized, am I eating that chocolate cake because I love chocolate cake? Or do I love being fat? Because it's comfortable. It's not challenging. It's not about having to worry whether this jeans is going to fit me or no. Is the next person going to look at me and ask me out or no? Because the whole world changed its perspective on me. But I wasn't ready to change my own perspective. So it was another learning curve. It was about learning that, you know what, actually, I don't want to be that skinny. I couldn't imagine myself staying at a size 14 and staying a size 80, you know, like being 80. I think I was 89 at my lowest. And I thought, I don't think I can do this. I wasn't ready enough. So what happened was, yes, the cake and the chocolates came in and everything else came in and the food came in, because that was my way of enjoying life, because I'd stay and I realized I had the fear of missing out because I missed everything for 18 months when I stayed home. So that was realizing, okay, I need to take a moment, I need to pause, and I need to stop and think, what am I doing? Is it worth going through what I just went through for 18 months and give it all? Or can I relearn this and teach myself a valuable lesson that, you know what, it doesn't matter what size I am or what weight I am at. I need to be happy with who I am.
And a beautiful message to those out there and the many millions and zillions of women and people out there who are worried about their weight. What's your advice to people out there who are constantly complaining, criticizing, bullying, doing whatever they're doing to their bodies?
I think one clear message would be, no matter what size you are at or how much you weigh, you're going to be unhappy if you choose to be unhappy. I chose to be unhappy at a size 14 and weighing at 89 kgs. Nobody thought I would ever get that. I look at those pictures now and I think, who would ever in their wildest think that that's who I was going to be? But I wasn't happy because it was not something I was happy at, because it was not my destination. And that's when I realized, it doesn't matter what the world thinks of me, because the whole world thought I was beautiful and I was looking amazing and I shouldn't gain any more weight. And I thought, but I'm not happy. And it doesn't matter what size or weight I am. I need to be okay with who I am. So no matter how, you know, I mean, and I'm not saying that I have never been bullied or I haven't been criticized. Trust me, growing up in a country like India where poverty is such a big factor, when they see someone as big as me walking down the street, I've been teased so much growing up that it's unbelievable. So it's not like I didn't know what it felt like being criticized. It was not from my family, but from people who didn't even know me. So my message would be that it doesn't matter what size you're at. You will always stay unhappy if you choose to be unhappy.
Absolutely.
And that is self-acceptance. It comes at a cost of awareness, that I would say, but once you're there, you can't make yourself unaware of everything you've learned.
So what, looking ahead in your life, what are you looking forward to? What pleasures are you looking forward to, and what goals do you have in life right at this moment?
Right this moment, one of the biggest goals I've had since I've been like, I can't even remember how old I was to learn saxophone, to learn to play the saxophone.
Love it.
And I started that last year. I told myself, you know what? I can't stand straight. My arms are not strong enough, but I'm going to find a saxophone teacher and I'm going to make myself do this.
Love
and
it.
I found myself. Yeah. So that was one of the first things that I had to get on top of my
So was that one of your
list.
childhood dreams?
It was one of my childhood dreams. I think this was pre-teenager, because my brother used to make me listen to Kenny G. And I absolutely love Kenny G.
Yeah, he rocked in those days. Sure. It's interesting you say that, and I love it, because often with my work with women, I often, when we're talking passion and what lights them up, because often women are around tolerating no pleasure in their life, and I ask them, what did you dream of as a young person? And they often go, oh, that's right, and they suddenly remember the joy that they had even imagining what they might want to become. And why not take that up as an adult at whatever age we are?
Yep, and that's what I do once a week. I go to my saxophone class. It's like breathing air to me now. I'm not very good at practicing it at home, but it's a commitment I made when I got better. When my recovery is still going to be ongoing for a bit longer, I know, but that's a commitment I made. I did other things, like I joined the Rotary Club because I like connecting with other people. So I became part of my local Rotary Club, got involved with them so I could reach out to more people, do things that I want to do. It's because for me, I'm a person, someone who likes connecting with others.
Yeah.
My job's already all about that, but I love doing that. So that's something else I've done. I make sure I take a holiday every so often. So those are some of the things I really enjoy doing, because that's important to me.
Nice. So talking about your job and your role in addictions, what is this transition, this personal transition for you? How has that changed the way you relate to people in your professional role, or even the theory around what you've learned in the past but now have a very different take on, I imagine? What's changed?
I'm telling you, the biggest thing it's taught me is being on the other side of the fence when I've been questioned about, say, whether it's self-harm, whether it's about drugs and alcohol, because that's something the hospital had to do so often with me. I've realized what the question feels like. No matter whether you're addicted, whether you're dependent or not, just being questioned, it's the way I relate to them. I always knew I could relate on a better level, but that just gave me more insight as to what that feels like being on the other side.
So what have you changed? What have you adjusted to make that an easier or more palatable question? Or what's actually changed?
What's changed? It's the way I question now. It's the way I ask them permission before I go straight to the question. Right. Prior to that, it was something we had to do, something you couldn't skip over. Now it's a bit conscious of asking for permission before I would even go to a territory that they might not want to approach. So it's about asking that question and asking for permission, and then say, looking, you have a choice. You can choose not to answer. However, if you do to answer, it's reminding them that, look, it is for your betterment, giving them a rationale as to why I'm asking, not just because I want to know what's to do to them or to other people. It's about giving them that reason and saying, look, I know what that feels like. I know it's not an easy question. Something else that I've done is I share a little bit more of my experience with other people. When people ask me, like, oh, what do you know what it feels like to be on the other side? I say, well, actually, I don't know what it feels like in terms in terms of addiction recovery, but I know what physical recovery is like, and I'm guessing it has some parallels to it. So, and if they do question, I'm willing to share within the bounds of our job, but Yeah, it's
but often
really
that
helped.
that deeper degree of intimacy with our clients or with our patients allows them to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just given me a better insight in terms of empathy, my level of empathy. I thought, oh no, I am an empathetic person. It's not like I'm not. But when you've been through so much, you realize what empathy actually needs to feel like, because I know what it felt like when, say, whether it was the nurse or the doctor or somebody else involved in my care didn't show me the empathy I needed at that stage. So it constantly, when sometimes, people around who I'm helping turn around and say, you're actually not helping. I always stop and remind myself, just remember what it felt like when you were the patient. That no matter what anybody said, like my brother would stand there and say, look, just listen to the doctor, he's trying to help you. And I would scream and look at people and say, actually, no, you don't know, because I'm the one in pain. So now it's like when they tell me, I remind myself, you know what that feels like. You've been there. So never forgetting that everybody has a story. So I think that's probably helped quite a bit. Then,
Namrata, just to wrap up, I'd love to know if faith has been a part that's played out in this transition of yours. Have you got a faith or an inner spirit that you kind of relate to, or what's got you?
Absolutely. Like, funny enough, I come from not a very religious background, but I grew up in a religious background. I went to a religious school as well at the same time. But luckily, my family was very flexible, and they said, look, we could decide if I didn't want to follow my particular religion that I'm born into. I kind of adapted a little bit of everything. During my recovery, I think my faith actually increased, or I kind of reconnected with my spirit, because right from saying that it was my 3 Hail Marys a day to saying the Serenity Prayer to some of my own religious prayers that my family grew up around, I realized it didn't matter what I said. It was the internal dialogue and my internal conversation with what I believe is the universal power or my higher power. I definitely, because that was one thing that kept me going. Because when you're lonely at night in a hospital and by yourself in a bed, that's when you realize how much faith plays a part in your life. Because I would listen to some of my religious things in my ear, and I think, for all the times I've doubted the existence of that higher power, that was the time that I got reminded that, no, I'm very, very attached to the idea of my higher power. And that's what kept me going. And it connected me to my inner spirit, where I thought, that's what's been missing, the passion and the fire in my belly that had been missing for a while, because I'd forgotten what it was like. So I did definitely reconnect to that, and I've stayed connected. I do everything it takes, because part of it was also learning gratitude, being extremely grateful for my family, my friends that supported me throughout that journey, and that inner power kept me going. I think that was a huge part of my recovery.
Namrata, you are fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing some of your journey and your transition into who you are, and keep writing that book. Books are, we can write many chapters, yeah?
No, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being part of this.
We honor you. Bye-bye.